this morning. We have Brenda and Peggy. They are the co-chairs of the Bainbridge Island Race Equity Task Force. The task force was actually a very forward-looking thing. They've been working with the city council for the past 2 years. And Brenda is going to share with us the different initiatives that the task force is working on. Brenda and Peggy said that they'd like this to be an interactive session, so you can ask questions through the chat window, or if you like, just kind of raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask your question. So this is going to be an informal and interactive session. And with that, I will turn it over to Brenda and Peggy.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. I'm going to bring up the presentation. Hi, everybody. Entire screen. Hang on. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so yeah, Peggy and I, we're members of the Race Equity Task Force, and this is the presentation that we just presented to City Council. Bob was asking me how we came about. A couple of years ago, I had gotten a call from one of our, I guess you would call her one of our leaders, Karen Vargas. And she told me that we were all meeting down at the City Council to talk about the racial issues that had been happening. We had some issues at the Bainbridge Yoga House, and someone had painted a swastika on the side of it. And then there were other issues with kids on the bus being called nigger. And so we all went to the City Council to give our personal stories of what we had experienced. And out of that, the city decided to create a race equity task force, and they put out information for people to apply for the committee. And then they interviewed us, and 7 of us were chosen. And so we've been working with the city before, the George Foreman thing happened. And so Bob was asking me, what our initiatives are now and whether or not they changed because of, the ongoing climate. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about what we're all about. So you can see what our mission is there, right there. We're trying to build awareness and solutions, and we wanted to be the leadership body for racial justice so that there is a place, a group where people can, reach out to us and let us know what's going on with them. And we are achieving our mission by doing community engagement. I don't know if you've ever seen us down at the farmers market. We've been out and about with different events. We attended the 4th of July parade. We're trying to make sure that the task force is providing some sort of learning to the city council so that we all can be on the same page when we're talking about racial equity. Because there's different terms, there's different, everybody has a whole different idea about what racial equity is all about. So part of our plan, which I'll get into a little bit later, is to bring in some training for the city council, for the task force, and also for the community. Advocacy and activation, we're out there, anywhere we can be, whether it's with Pulse Bowl, with the things that they're going through, or Bremerton, and because we got into this before anybody else, other cities are kind of looking at us as the one to kind of follow. So Bremerton also has a race equity task force. And I believe there's other cities that are thinking about doing the same thing. So we presented our 2020 work plan to the city council. You know what, with COVID coming, we had to stop all of our activities. We had to use there's a group called Erase, and it's also an advocacy group. There's a larger group called Kitsap Erase, and there's a smaller one for Bainbridge. And we actually used them to write letters to the city so that we could be deemed essential, so that we could get back to our work. You know, while the city council was meeting, we wanted to meet also. And that really helped us out. So the activities that we have currently are to become a member of GARE, which is the Government Alliance for Racial Equity. And they are a consortium of different cities. They work with different cities and states on racial equity issues. We were trying to become a member since last November. We were under the impression that we had become a member, but there was mix up in the formal membership. We just became a member a couple of weeks ago. And so GARE is also going to be providing the training, the racial equity training to the city council, the community, and to the task force. We also have community events and outreach, which I mentioned a little bit of at the farmers market. We held a rally just a couple of weeks ago. And we also gave a proposal to the city council for us to become a standing committee instead of a task force. And there's a lot of different things that goes with that. Like I said, we've been doing this for 2 years, and they had been extending us, you know, every 6 months. And so instead of continuing to be extended, we want to be a permanent standing committee. There were 2 additional areas of work that we had to bring to the city council to get permission to continue. One was the community welcoming sign and the racial equity lens, which I will get into a little bit more on the next couple of slides. So we don't have any authority to do anything other than raise the awareness, which is what it says in our statement, because all of these things have been, you know, they haven't been raised to the level to where the community gets involved and send emails to the city and let them know that the community is concerned. And that's what we're trying to be, the like gathering place for that, so that we can do community action to say, hey, city, what are you going to do about this? You know. So the standing committee recommendation that we've given to the city was mainly because we wanted to be the technical and planning advisory committee, right? We wanted to look at some of the goals and the policies that the city has to try to determine whether or not racial equity has been built in, or how to undo some of the systemic racism that may be involved in some of the codes and the policies. We wanted to be able to advise and recommend to the city council for when they're determining who to place on different committees and how they go about their interviews, and trying to make sure that there's some accountability where we can say to the community, we can kind of measure whether or not there's been some progress in trying to include equity into some of the city's processes. The welcoming sign was something that we have been trying to get going since April of 2019. And we have Bainbridge has a resolution 2017 that says that Bainbridge is welcoming and inclusive. And the only problem that we saw with that is that we, as a city, we have a lot of resolutions. We have resolutions for Women's Day. We got February is Martin Luther King. And, and it's like, we're good at putting these things down on paper, but what kind of actions are we taking that really puts our money where our mouth is, So we kind of thought that this would be something that the whole community could get around. Other cities have enacted welcoming signs. And so we gave the city a proposal and we gave them some language to try to even up the language that they already have, which is pretty much outdated. So this is the resolution and this is what it reads: persons of all races, creeds, and color. So some of these words are kind of outdated. We don't say that anymore. So the language that we gave the city, I don't know if they're going to change the resolution or if they're just going to build the signs and be happy with that. But that's pretty much up to them. The city did, after we gave them this proposal, they did unanimously agree to go ahead with the signs. So we've proposed 2 signs, one down by the ferry and one hopefully right by the bridge, maybe on top of the other Bainbridge sign that's there. And we're working with the city to help us to develop what that's going to look like. So I think the people who live here already know that Bainbridge is a welcoming city. But I often worry about the people who come here and don't know that. And because the experience that I shared that night at the city council was walking down Winslow Way and having someone move their child out the way, like I was gonna hurt their child or something. And those type of microaggressions that I get from what I think are tourists who are really surprised to see me here. I want them to know that we have people of color and that they're welcome here. And so it makes people of color feel welcome. And I think that's how we build the equity in, and it's not just people of color. It's like it says, it's all people. We welcome everybody. When we talk about racial equity, we're not just talking about colors. We're talking about gender identity. We're talking about people who have physical challenges. We're not just on people of color. It's everybody. So, okay, I'm going to move on. This was just a representation to try to show everybody that equity and equality are 2 really different things. We want things to be equal for everybody, but for things to be equal for everybody, we all have to start at the same spot. And that's one of the hardest concepts for people to understand, is that we are not all born at the same spot. Some people have a leg up on life that other people don't. And the whole thing about equity is making sure we all are at the same starting point so that we can all put in the same effort to get ahead. So the other proposal that we gave to the city was that the Race Equity Task Force be allowed to hire a consultant to help us to develop what we are calling a racial equity lens. And this racial equity lens is going to help us to be a checkpoint for accountability for racial equity, looking at our policies and procedures and how we evaluate, our processes. The whole idea came about, I think there was some issues around the planning committee and how they could build equity in when they're adding people to that committee, and what type of lens do we look at. And Peggy, you want to talk a little bit about this, because you helped to develop some equity questions that we used as we increased our committee to 2 members. We had a list of equity questions that we asked them, because we want to make sure that the people that we're getting on this committee already has an equity mindset. You don't want to, have to try to, I don't want to have to try to tell somebody that, yeah, there's racial problems out there, and you don't even believe that. So you're not the kind of person I want on the committee, right? I want to make sure you understand that we're fighting for the same thing here, and I shouldn't have to try to, you know, tell you that's out there. That's something that's going on in the world that you should already know. So, you know, this equity lens is not only just questions for people who are coming on a committee, it's a whole mindset around trying to target what's the best approach to evaluate the policies and trying to make sure that all of our committees and our city council and everything that we're doing for the city, as far as whether it's the planning commission, the housing commission, the environmental committee, whatever committee they're working on, that they're thinking about equity in all of their projects and in all of their ideas. You know, I'm also a member of the transportation committee, and we're trying to make sure that there's, you know, some of the big ideas that we have for that is trying to either give a decreased amount to people who have to ride the bus who have special abilities, or no fee at all to ride the bus. You know, trying to think about ways to make it easier and equitable for people who already are marginalized or already are not starting in the same spot that everybody else is. So that's the whole idea around the equity lens. And this, you know, it came out of trying to identify who's running our systems, you know, and whether or not the people that are running our systems, the people that are in power, if they already come into it with a biased opinion, that's bound to affect, you know, the outcome as far as social, culture, and economic resources. And those are the kinds of things that people normally don't even see because it's so embedded into, you know, our society that you can't even see that there is a systemic problem because it's been that way for so long. And you know, and you bring it up and you say, well, this may look like you're not including everybody when you're deciding to, say, build a big hotel or whatever you're deciding to do. Are you including, you know, are you thinking about everybody when you're doing that? And you know, it's kind of hard to turn that boat, you know, and to change people's thinking. But, you know, I like to tell them, you know, just because things have been that way for a long time doesn't make it right. You know, we need to look at it.
Right. It's like the status quo is inequity. And so we're just thinking, oh, that's the way things are. That's the way they've always been. And, you know, that's what needs to change.
Yeah. It's changing people's minds and hearts. But I'm always being told that. That's a hard thing to do. So this equity lens, you know, people say, well, why do we need that? Well, because we want to make sure that there is attention on race and ethnicity while we're looking at problems and looking for solutions, you know. We need to start by analyzing the data, trying to understand why the disparities exist, what the root causes are. And, you know, people don't like to go back and look at that, but I mean, it's a part of it. And it's not pointing fingers, but we have to name it. You know, once we name it, then we can claim it and, you know, shed light on what it's all about and try to fix it, you know. The whole idea is to try to reshape what we know, you know, as a fact. We know for a fact that if we go back far enough, we definitely find out where it all started and how it's been woven into our society as a whole. So it's going to take a long time to pull it out, you know, and fix it. But as long as we're talking about it, we can shed light on it. Go ahead, Dave.
For example, Karen Vargas was doing research and she found a law that actually removed all Native Americans and Black people from Bainbridge Island. And that was, you know, a long time ago, but it was there. And it wasn't anything that anyone was teaching or was aware of. So we have to unearth some of this hidden history on our own island.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I was on a panel for Blodell. They're looking into what they can do to make sure that they have racial equity going in their policies and things. And I can't quite remember who it was on there, but they talked about that some of the history of Blodell goes back to when it was owned by a Black man. And you know, what I want to see from our historical society is things like that, because that interests me. It's like, oh, and that's something, you know, it's like, it's really nice to, especially for African Americans, to find some, you know, history that's good history, you know, because so many of us can't trace back as far as other people. And so when we hear about, you know, someone over in Bremerton or wherever who, you know, they go all the way back to the 1600s, it's like, wow, that's great. You know, it just feels good as a person to know some good history about your race. So, okay, I'm gonna keep going. And those are some of the measurements that we want to start looking at. You know, how can we, you know, determine some accountability for what they're doing? You know, how can we say, yeah, that what you're doing here is really good for everybody? You know, how do we measure that everybody is everybody who is marginalized or who is not marginalized, that everybody's included? So how do we move the needle? This is what I told them that we needed. We needed support from the city council and the city manager. We want to hire a consultant to bring them on board to help us out to create this lens. And this is another one of the items that was approved unanimously by the city council that night. So we began to work on this, which is great. I mean, I don't know another city who's looking at this way. So, you know, I really congratulated the city council on being one of the first to be thinking about it like this. So we're hoping to get to work on this pretty quickly so that we can capture, you know, the spirit of what's going on and try to get this moving. Do you have suggestions how to respond when a white person makes a subtle, rather overt racial comment, especially in the presence of a person of color? Yeah, I think you have to speak up. And you know, what I always say, you know, is, you know, that's really not appropriate. You know, then they can ask me what I mean by that. And I can give them examples of how whatever it was they said could hurt me. You know, it like, that really hurts me when you say something like that. Either I had a woman who told me once, she said, well, you know, I don't see color. And I told her, I said, you know, that might have been an appropriate thing to say years ago. But when you say that to me today, it makes me feel like you don't see me. Because I wake up Black every day. I see it. So you're discounting that I'm even here. You know, and that hurts me. That would be like me saying to you, you're invisible. So any issues you have are invisible too. It's taken me, I'm 62. So this last, I guess, 5 or 10 years since I've been doing this work is where I've finally been able to give a name to the things that I felt. I didn't know they had a name. I didn't know they were microaggressions. When people would give me the look or just, you know, say something out of the way, I didn't know how to react. Most of the time I was just so shocked that there was no response. And I'm the kind of person that I'll come up with a response 3 or 4 days later and it's too late, the person's gone, whatever. So now I just always try to remember that that's not appropriate. You know, then that gives me a chance to tried to center in on how it's making me feel, you know. Yeah, I'm so impatient when it comes to people making comments to kids, because I know if I can't process it, I know they can't either, you know. So yeah.
I thank you for the word inappropriate. That's absolutely right. Right. I had an experience that happened to do with the fact that they had the transgender or all-inclusive bathrooms over at the Mariners when a couple of years ago when they incorporated that. And one of the people on my team made the remark, well, it was inappropriate, totally. I can't even remember what it was because I was so angry about it.
Yeah.
It was inappropriate. And I looked at her and I said, you know, you can't, that's not right. But I wish I'd had the word then, but now I've got the word. Thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome. Yeah, and you know, people are always asking me, well, what can I do? What can I do to try to help the cause? And that's what you can do. It's right in your circle, you know. It's the people that you interact with every day. When you see that, say something to them, because, you know, if you don't say something, that means you're condoning it. And they think that it's okay to tell those inappropriate jokes and all of that around you is fine because you're not saying anything against it, you know. My husband is white, right? And so just last night we were with some people and the guy, when he left, he said, okay, I'll see you later, sister. And man, my husband got into an uproar because the guy called me sister. He said, that is not appropriate. You cannot talk to her like that. That is my wife. And I'm trying to understand why he's upset, right? So what he said to me made him more upset than me, because he said, oh, that's like calling a black child, a little boy, a boy, or rubbing his head. And he associated it with all of the things that he's heard me say, you know, and to him, that was one of them. It was like, no, you can't call her that. And I was like, okay, you know, but that's what we have to do. We have to, our circle, if we hear something that's not appropriate, we have to say it.
You know, there are ways. I mean, if people, you know, are sincerely like, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, I didn't mean to offend, you know, and they're interested in learning more, you can point them in some directions to help them, because, you know, most of our bias is unconscious, not intended. People say it, you know, and they don't realize that they're coming from a place of socialized racism, really. And so, you know, it's always good if they're interested to kind of point them in direction of some resources or people or, you know, meetings or groups, you know, where they can continue to educate themselves.
Yeah.
Probably one of the first things that ever occurred to me as far as inequality or inappropriate, I should say, statements was when I was living in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, which is Polish capital of the world, other than elsewhere. But the amount of Polish jokes that went around were absolutely horrendous. I mean, and by non-Poles, and it was sickening. It was absolutely to the point of being sickening. And I was, at that point, I was naive and didn't say anything at all other than my heart of hearts saying, oh God, I hate that, you know, kind of thing. But that was my first experience of really of a racial, absolutely a racial epithets being thrown around like crazy. And you know, the Polish jokes are, you know, multitudinous, and anything like that is inappropriate. And I know we're talking about race and gender and all of that stuff, but it all comes into the same kind of milieu, I believe. I have to keep my ears open and my mouth going, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think I've been here now about 12, 13 years, and I used to do the van pool over to Seattle. And I remember one rainy, you had to get up at the crack of dawn to get the boat and get in the van. And one rainy night, well, morning, whether I'm in the back of the van and the guy's driving, and he says, "Brenda, you need to smile so we can see you back there." And that was the last night, the last morning I rode the van. I said, I don't, but I didn't have words. I didn't know, I knew it hurted me, but I didn't know what I couldn't say, "Hey, that's inappropriate. That's a microaggression. You shouldn't," it was more like, for me, because this is where I come from, it was more like, "I wish I had a gun. I could just blow your head off," one of those, and because that was the range I had from that to, to I'm gonna do something bad to you, and there was no teaching moment at all in that. It was like, because it shocked me, and I've heard that kind of stuff all my life, and like I said, it's just the last 10 years or whatever that I've been able to identify it. And yeah, and it takes a weight off of me, and now I'm in the place where I can educate somebody. I don't have to go to, "Well, I wish I could blow your head off." I can try to say something that might try to help them, not do that again to somebody else,
This listening and hearing this perspective, you grow up thinking you're not racist, and you work at it, and it's ingrained in you. But listening to what you're saying, there's such subtle. I mean, that didn't seem that subtle, but there are such subtle things that happen. And I think your point of saying, "Okay, now I have a label of microaggression," and actually that's a new term for me too. But it's really important for each of us to be thinking and to be holding ourselves responsible, and to be holding ourselves accountable, and raising the bar a bit. And it's very thoughtful, Brenda, and it's very, this has been a really good morning to hear all these things.
And Megan, I think you had a question.
Yeah, Brenda, I'm wondering how you react to people who have embodied that racism since they were a child, and how to reach them. I have family members that say, "Yeah, I'm a racist. I can't help it. There's nothing I can do."
Yeah, that's not true. I mean, they just have to do a little bit of the work. I mean, for me, I think it's easy for me because of my faith. I go right to my faith, and it's like, I believe we were all put here for the same reason, and that there is no separation, and it's, if I could reach you on a spiritual level, that you should have compassion for everybody. You should not just, you can't separate people out by color. I also, yeah, I really don't think there's nobody that I couldn't reach if I had, just sit down and talk with them to try to find out where they're coming from. I mean, after I wrote that book, I had people come to me and tell me, we still live like that in the South. My mother still has maids, and she still has, and people who are, for some reason, ashamed of that legacy, and to try to let them know that that's it's not your fault. It's your fault if you continue it. You know what I mean? But you can't go back and make restitution for harms done for something that was done before you were even born. You know what I mean? So I think coming to people on that kind of level, it's not, you know, there is no blame. The only blame is when you continue it. If you're trying to do something about it, if you're, you know, owning it and saying, okay, I'm a racist. I mean, I tell the story all the time about being in Detroit, and I see a bunch of guys coming toward me. I'm scared. I'm not scared because I'm Black. I'm scared because I'm in Detroit. You know what I mean? It's like, if they were white guys coming at me, I'd be scared, you know, because of where I lived, where I came from. You know, the fear was always there. So it's not, I think people misunderstand when they think that everybody in one race is bad, and you know, and everybody in another race is good. And the people who were raised like that, there's a lot of good literature out there that can help them see it from the other side. You know, whether it's Tanisha Coates' Between the World and Me, where he talks a lot about how people perceive the Black body. It's just when you see a Black body, it's what comes to your mind, you know, and that is really hard to separate. And it's hard on the other side too. When I see a white person, I already got an image. It's already there, you know. That's what we're trying to undo. It's like, we need to just see people as people and not automatically put a label and a tag on it that all of these are like that, you know. And you know,
I think there's a.
Go ahead, Peggy.
Go ahead, Brenda.
No, I just think that there's a line we can all be on if we say that all people, you know, we should have compassion for all people. You know, that's where we have to start.
Yeah, and then Brenda, not everybody might be familiar with the title of your book, so this is a great time for a shameless plug. So,
shameless plug is titled "Imagine Me."
Imagine Me. Okay, thank you very much.